Most people would scream if they discovered their father's new wife had quietly drained $48,000 from their life savings. I didn't make a sound. I just sat in my car, watching Darlene hang a festive wreath on the door she bought with my future. She thinks my silence is surrender. But she is wrong. I don't scream. I calculate. And for her housewarming party, I brought a gift that is going to cost her absolutely everything. My life in Ravenport, Massachusetts, was built on a foundation of quiet, architectural precision. At 33 years old, I had curated an existence that felt less like a life and more like a well-fortified structure. I worked as a senior analyst for the Northbridge Compliance Group, a job that required me to spend 8 hours a day looking for patterns that did not fit, numbers that strayed from their columns, and people who thought they could bend the rules without breaking the glass. I was good at it because I liked rules. Rules were safe. Rules meant that if you stood on the designated line, the floor would not drop out from under you. My apartment was the physical manifestation of this philosophy. It was a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a brick building near the harbor, far enough away from the tourist traps to be quiet, but close enough to smell the salt when the wind turned east. Inside, everything had a place. My coasters were stacked. My books were arranged by genre and then by author. My finances were tracked in a master spreadsheet that I updated every Friday evening with a glass of Pinot Noir and the satisfaction of a woman who owed nothing to anyone. I had spent 10 years rebuilding my life after the chaotic blast radius of my parents' divorce. I had learned early that love was volatile, but compound interest was reliable. So, I saved. I saved with a neurotic intensity that would have worried a therapist. I had my emergency fund, my retirement fund, and then I had the reset fund. That was the big one. The secret one. It sat in a high-yield savings account at a regional bank I rarely used for daily transactions, accumulating interest and waiting for the day I decided I needed a different life. It was $48,000 of pure freedom. Then came the invitation. My father, Graham Morgan, had sent a text message 3 days ago. He wanted to meet for a celebration dinner, a small family thing, just the 3 of us, the third person, of course, being Darlene West. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, smoothing the lint from my navy blazer. I looked like my mother, or so people told me. I had her dark eyes and her tendency to hold her jaw tight when she was assessing a threat. My father had married Darlene 6 months ago in a whirlwind ceremony in Florida that I had attended with a plastered-on smile. Darlene was everything my mother was not. She was soft edges, pastel colors, and vocal fry. She was a woman who used the word bless as a punctuation mark and touched people's arms when she spoke to them. I checked my watch. It was 6:30. I was going to be exactly on time. The restaurant was one of those new upscale bistros in downtown Ravenport that served deconstructed food on slate tiles. When I walked in, I saw them immediately. My father looked older than his 60 years, his shoulders slightly hunched, his gray hair thinning. Beside him, Darlene was a beacon of peach chiffon. She was laughing at something he had said, her hand resting possessively on his forearm. "Hello, Kennedy," Darlene said as I approached the table. She stood up to hug me, enveloping me in a cloud of vanilla and expensive floral perfume. "You look so serious today. Doesn't she look serious?" Graham. I extricated myself from the hug and sat down. "It's been a long week at the firm," I said, unfolding my napkin. "Compliance audits wait for no one." Darlene signaled the waiter with a flutter of her fingers. "You work too hard. Honey, you need to learn to let go a little. That is what I am always telling your father. Life is for living." "Right?" My father smiled at her, a look of dopey adoration that made my stomach turn slightly. "Darlene is right. Kenny, you are always so disciplined. It is good to relax." We ordered drinks, wine for them, sparkling water for me, and the conversation drifted through the usual pleasantries. The weather, the traffic on the bridge, the local town council elections, but I could feel the texture of the conversation shifting. Darlene was steering the ship, and she was turning it toward waters I did not like. "So, Kennedy," Darlene said, leaning forward, her chin resting on her clasped hands, Graham tells me you were looked at for a promotion last quarter. That must come with a nice bump in salary. I imagine I took a sip of water, measuring my response. It is a standard adjustment. Nothing life-changing. I prefer to keep my finances boring. Darlene laughed, a tinkling sound that seemed practiced. Boring is safe, I suppose. But don't you ever want to do something wild? Invest in something tangible. Graham says, you are a wizard with savings. I looked at my father. He was studying the menu with intense fascination, avoiding my eyes. I manage, I said flatly. You know, Darlene continued, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. We do not keep score in families. That is what I always say, your mother. God rest her soul was a lovely woman, I am sure. But Graham told me she was a bit dramatic about money, always hiding things in separate accounts. That creates such distance. Don't you think my mother was not dramatic? I said, my voice cool. She was prudent, and she believed that financial independence was important for a woman. Darlene waved her hand airily. Oh, independence is fine, but partnership is better. Healing old wounds requires openness. That is why Graham and I decided to combine everything. A fresh start, no secrets. I felt a prickle of warning at the base of my neck. My father had always been terrible with money. He was generous to a fault and easily swayed by a good sales pitch. If he had combined his finances with Darlene, that was his business. But hearing her speak about it with such satisfaction made me uneasy. Actually, Graham said, finally looking up, that is part of what we wanted to tell you. We have some news. I braced myself. We bought a house, Darlene announced, beaming. I blinked. My father's condo was perfectly fine. It was paid off. It was sensible. A house, I asked. In Briar Glen, she said, referencing a new luxury development about 20 minutes outside of town. It is gorgeous. Kennedy, 4 bedrooms, a sunroom, a 3-car garage. It is a fresh start for all of us. Briar Glen was expensive, very expensive. That sounds ambitious, I said carefully. Oh, do not be such a worrier, Darlene said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. I pulled my hand back under the pretense of reaching for my water glass. We managed the down payment just fine. And the best part is, we picked a model with a beautiful guest suite on the ground floor. It is waiting for you. Kennedy, if you ever get lonely in that little apartment of yours, or if you ever just need to come home, I am not lonely, I said, and I have a home. Graham cleared his throat. It is just an offer. Kenny, we want you to feel included. Darlene has been working so hard to make this happen. She handled all the financing, dealt with the brokers. I just had to sign the papers. Of course she did. I thought. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of Darlene talking about granite countertops, smart home security systems, and the high-end appliances she had ordered. She asked me again about my investments, asking if I preferred mutual funds or bonds, and I gave her vague, non-committal answers. I watched her eyes as she asked. They were blue, sharp, and calculating, even as her mouth maintained a permanent, welcoming smile. She was hunting for information, but I could not figure out why. She had the house. She had my father. What did she want with my portfolio when the check came? Darlene made a show of grabbing it. It is on us, she declared. Celebrate the new chapter. I drove home in the rain, the windshield wipers slapping a steady rhythm against the glass. I felt drained, as if I had spent 3 hours holding up a wall that was trying to fall on me. When I got inside my apartment, I double-locked the door and changed into sweatpants. I needed to reset my baseline. I sat on my sofa, opened my laptop, and pulled up my budget. It was my ritual. Checking the numbers calmed me. I logged into my checking account, my primary savings, and my credit cards. Everything was normal. Balances were where they should be. Then, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a notification from an email address I used strictly for spam and old accounts, a relic from my college days. I frowned and picked up the phone. Subject action required. Verification of micro deposit. I stared at the screen. A microdeposit was a small amount of money, usually a few cents, sent by a bank to verify that an external account was valid before linking it for transfers. I opened the email. It was from Sovereign Heritage Bank. My stomach dropped. Sovereign Heritage was where I kept the reset fund. I had not touched that account in 3 years. I did not carry a debit card for it. I did not have the app on my phone. It was a ghost account, designed to be invisible until I needed it. Why would there be a micro-deposit verification? I felt a sudden, cold clarity wash over me. I moved to my laptop and typed in the Sovereign Heritage URL. My fingers were steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I entered my username. I entered my password. Error. The username or password you entered is incorrect. I typed it again, carefully, slower. Error. I clicked on the Forgot Password link. A password reset link has been sent to the email address on filedn@gmail.com. That was not my email address. My email started with a K. I sat back, the air in the room suddenly feeling very thin. Someone had changed the contact information on the account. That meant they had already gotten in. I looked at the clock. It was 9:15 on a Friday night. The branches were closed, but the fraud line would be open. I dialed the number on the back of my old records. I navigated the automated menu, my voice robotic as I stated my social security number. Finally, a human voice came on the line. Sovereign Heritage Security. This is Mark. How can I help you? My name is Kennedy Morgan. I said, I am locked out of my account, and the recovery email is not mine. I believe there has been a breach. There was a pause, the sound of typing on the other end. Let me verify your identity. Ms. Morgan, we went through the security questions. Mother's maiden name, name of first pet, high school mascot. I answered them all mechanically. Okay. Ms. Morgan, Mark said. I see the account here. I see a profile update made 4 days ago. The email and phone number were changed. I did not authorize that. I said, okay, I see a note here on the file. It says the changes were made in person at the Ravenport branch. In person, I asked. That is impossible. I was at work. The typing stopped. The authorized signer was present. I do not have an authorized signer. I said, it is an individual account. There was a long silence on the line. Ms. Morgan, according to the system, an authorization form was processed adding a joint owner to the account last Tuesday. The form was signed and notarized. Who, I asked. The word came out as a whisper. Graham Morgan. The agent said. I closed my eyes. The darkness behind my eyelids was spinning. Graham Morgan. My father. And, Mark continued, his voice hesitant now, seeing the flag on the screen. There have been several transfers initiated since Tuesday. External transfers to an account at Harborvine Financial. How much, I asked. The balance is currently $42.16. The number hit me like a physical blow. $48,000. Gone. In 4 days. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Can you tell me, was there a note? A reason for the access? The agent hesitated. The teller notes are internal, ma'am. But it says here, daughter requested family consolidation due to schedule conflicts. Father adding access to assist with management. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. It was not a panic attack. Panic is hot and chaotic. This was cold. It was the freezing, absolute realization that my reality had been dismantled while I was sitting at my desk looking at spreadsheets. Family consolidation. The exact phrase Darlene had used at dinner. We don't keep score in families. Freeze the account, I said. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from someone else in the room. Flag it for fraud. I cannot technically call it fraud if the joint owner is a legal signer. Mark said gently, but I can freeze it for review. You will need to come into a branch to dispute the authorization documents. Freeze it. I repeated. I hung up the phone. I did not scream. I did not throw the laptop across the room. I sat in the silence of my apartment, listening to the rain hit the window. $48,000. It wasn't just money. It was 10 years of skipped vacations, It was the lunches I didn't buy. It was the car I drove for 6 years after it should have been scrapped. It was my safety. It was the wall between me and the chaos of the world. And my father had signed the paper. But my father didn't know my account number. He didn't know the specific bank I used for that fund. We never talked about it. I had never told him. There was only one place that information existed outside of my head. I stood up and walked to my closet. On the top shelf, behind a stack of winter sweaters, was a heavy, fireproof lockbox. I pulled it down and set it on the bed. I dialed the combination. Inside were the papers my mother had left me. She had passed away 5 years ago, but her influence was still the scaffolding of my life. She had been sharp, cynical, and fiercely protective. I dug through the folders until I found the manila envelope labeled Kennedy, Future. I opened it. Inside was the original opening paperwork for the Sovereign Heritage account. And clipped to it was a letter, written in my mother's jagged, assertive cursive. Kennedy, this is yours, not for bills, not for a boy, and not for your father. Graham is a good man, but he has a hole in his pocket where his spine should be. He will give away everything he has to the person who asks the loudest. You keep this separate. You keep this safe. This is your exit strategy. Just in case. I stared at the letter. My father knew this box existed. He had seen me take it from the house after the funeral. He knew I kept Mom's papers. Darlene, she must have found out. She must have drilled him, charmed him, or bullied him until he remembered that Kennedy had a special account somewhere, and then she had convinced him that it was silly to keep things separate. Family consolidation. She had probably filled out the forms herself, guided his hand to the signature line, and told him he was being a good father, helping me manage my life, taking the burden off my shoulders. And then she had used my money to buy her sunroom. I looked at the date on the letter. I looked at the empty space where my future used to be. A normal person would call their father right now. A normal person would drive to Briar Glen and scream on the front lawn until the neighbors called the police. A normal person would explode. But I was not a normal person. I was a compliance analyst. I investigated risk. I documented failure. And I knew that if I exploded now, Darlene would win. She would paint me as the hysterical daughter, the one who was obsessed with money like her mother. She would cry. My father would comfort her. He would say it was a misunderstanding, a loan, a family matter. He would look at me with disappointed eyes and ask why I had to be so difficult. No. I closed the lockbox. I put it back on the shelf. I walked to my desk and opened a fresh drawer. I took out a blank, 3-ring binder. I labeled the spine with a single piece of tape and a black marker, Housewarming. I sat down at my computer and opened a new document. I typed the date. I typed the time of the call with the bank. I typed the name of the agent. I typed the specific phrases Darlene had used at dinner. We don't keep score in families. A room for you if you ever get lonely. She wanted a fresh start. I would give her one. I would go to her housewarming. I would eat her appetizers. I would compliment her curtains. I would smile until my face hurt. And while she played the role of the benevolent matriarch, I would be building a case so watertight that when I finally pulled the plug, she wouldn't just drown. She would be crushed by the pressure. I turned off the lamp, leaving the room in darkness. The rain had stopped, leaving only the heavy, damp silence of the aftermath. I wasn't Kennedy the daughter anymore. I was the auditor, and the audit had just begun. The PDF file from Sovereign Heritage Bank arrived in my inbox at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. It was a standard security packet, the kind generated when a customer disputes authorization. I was sitting at my desk at Northbridge Compliance Group, surrounded by 2 monitors and a half-empty cup of black coffee, but I might as well have been standing on the edge of a cliff. I opened the file. It contained scans of the signature card, the account modification form, and the notarized addendum that had granted access to my reset fund. I zoomed in on the signature line. There, in blue ink, was the name Graham Morgan. I stared at it until the pixels started to blur. I knew my father's signature better than I knew my own. I had seen it on permission slips, on birthday cards, on the checks he used to write for my college tuition before the money ran out. His signature was usually loopy, open, a little careless with the spacing between the first and last name. This signature was tight. The G was cramped, lacking the sweeping underloop he always used. The M in Morgan was sharp, almost jagged. It looked like his name, but it looked like it had been written by a hand that was shaking, or a hand that was being guided by someone else. Or perhaps it was simply the hand of a man who knew he was stealing from his daughter and was trying to get it over with as quickly as possible. The uncertainty was a physical weight in my gut. If he had forged it, that was a crime. If he had signed it willingly, that was a betrayal. If he had been coerced, that was a tragedy. I did not know which option I was rooting for. I printed the documents and slid them into the binder I had labeled Housewarming. Then I closed my email, picked up my phone, and made a call I had been dreading. The offices of Klein Barlow Legal Services were located in a brownstone on the edge of the historic district, far enough from the financial center to feel discreet. Marina Klein was a woman who dealt in the messy intersections of money and family. She did not advertise, and her office did not have a view. It had floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a sound machine that hummed white noise in the corner to mask conversations. I sat in a leather chair that was slightly too large for me, my binder on my lap. Marina sat opposite me, reviewing the copies I had brought. She was in her 50s, wearing a sharp gray suit and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She turned the pages slowly, her face unreadable. "So," she said, placing the papers on the desk. "You are telling me this signature is a forgery." I paused. "I am telling you it is irregular, and the beneficiary of the transfers Harbor Vine Financial." I said. I traced the routing number. "It is a lending institution that specializes in high-risk mortgages and bridge loans." Marina took off her glasses. "Kennedy, I need you to be very clear with me. Are you looking to file a police report against your father?" The question hung in the air. "No," I said, "not yet. I want to understand what happened first. If I file a report now, the bank is legally obligated to involve law enforcement. If it turns out my father was confused or manipulated, I do not want him in handcuffs. I want the money back, and I want to know who actually pushed the pen." Marina nodded, tapping a pen against her notebook. "You are smart to be cautious. If you accuse him and you are wrong, you destroy the relationship. If you accuse him and you are right, you still might destroy the relationship. But if there is a third party involved, this new wife you mentioned, then the dynamic changes. She is the beneficiary." I said, "The money went to the house she lives in." "Indirectly." "Yes," Marina corrected. "But the paper trail leads to a lender, not her personal checking account. That is a distinction that matters." She leaned forward. "Here is my advice. Do not confront them. Not yet. If you scream fraud right now, they will circle the wagons. If there was coercion, the person doing the coercing will make sure your father takes the fall. They will say he borrowed it. They will say you agreed to it verbally. It becomes a he said, she said mess. So what do? I asked. "You let them get comfortable," Marina said. "You preserve everything, every text, every email, every receipt. You watch the money. Where did it move? Which institutions? Who is actually benefiting from the purchase? And most importantly, watch the dynamic. Forgery is rarely a one-time event. It is usually part of a pattern of control." She slid the folder back to me. "Go to this housewarming," she said. "Be the good daughter. Let them think they got away with it. People who think they are safe get sloppy." I took her advice. 3 days later, I drove to Briar Glen. The development was carved out of what used to be old farmland. The trees were too young. The grass was too green, and the houses were massive, hulking structures of beige siding and stone veneer that looked like they had been 3D printed rather than built. I pulled into the driveway of number 42. It was a sprawling colonial with a 3-car garage and a front door that looked like it belonged on a cathedral. My father answered the door. He looked tired. He was wearing a polo shirt that was brand new, the creases from the packaging still visible on the sleeves. "Kenny," he said, his smile looking relieved. "You made it." I stepped inside. The house smelled of fresh paint and sawdust. It was cavernous. The foyer opened into a 2-story living room that echoed when we walked. It is impressive. Dad, I said, it is a lot of house, he admitted. Scratching the back of his neck, Darlene loves it. She has big plans for the landscaping. Darlene appeared from the kitchen, wearing a floral apron over a cashmere sweater. Kennedy, you are just in time to help me with the invitations. She kissed my cheek, her lips barely grazing my skin. I followed her into the kitchen. It was a showpiece, with an island the size of a landing strip and appliances that looked like they could launch a satellite. On the counter, amidst a pile of fabric swatches and paint chips, was a stack of mail. I watched as Darlene picked it up. She sorted through it rapidly. Bills, catalogs, flyers. She handed a golf magazine to my father and kept the rest. Nothing interesting today. Graham, she said, sliding a stack of envelopes into a drawer near the refrigerator. I noted the drawer. Can I get you something to drink? Darlene asked. We have iced tea, lemonade, wine. Iced tea is fine, I said, as she turned to the refrigerator. My eyes scanned the chaos on the island. There, half buried under a flyer for custom blinds, was a manila folder. The tab was labeled in Darlene's expansive handwriting, Briar Glen Title Escrow. I moved slightly, pretending to admire the backsplash, until I was close enough to read the paper protruding from the top of the folder. It was a receipt for a wire transfer fee. I recognized the bank logo. It was Sovereign Heritage, and there, printed in the corner of the receipt, were the last 4 digits of the originating account, my account, the reset fund. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face remained still. Seeing the digital record was one thing. Seeing the physical paper in her kitchen, sitting next to a bowl of lemons, was another. It was a violation so casual it made me nauseous. Darlene turned around with the glass of tea. Here you go, sweetie. I took the glass. Thank you. This kitchen is amazing. Darlene, it must have cost a fortune to renovate. She smiled, leaning against the counter. Oh, the builder included some upgrades, and we moved some resources around. It was worth it. We want this to be the gathering place for the whole family. My father was sitting at the island, staring at his hands. Dad, I said, turning to him, I was actually looking at my own budget yesterday. I am thinking about finally putting a down payment on that condo near the harbor I told you about. The air in the room shifted instantly. My father looked up, his eyes widening slightly. Oh, that is great. Honey, Darlene's smile didn't vanish, but it tightened. The corners of her mouth became rigid. A condo, she asked. Now the market is terrible. Kennedy, interest rates are through the roof. I have a significant down payment saved, I said, watching her carefully. I have been saving for 10 years. It should be enough to offset the rates. Darlene laughed. A short, sharp sound. Oh, honey, do not be so hasty. You know, hoarding money in a savings account is actually losing money with inflation. You should stop hoarding and start living. She walked over to my father and placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing it. Besides, she continued, looking at me with eyes that were hard as flint, real estate is tricky. You don't want to tie up all your liquidity. I have a great financial advisor I could introduce you to. He helped us with the bridge loan for this place. He is a miracle worker. I felt a cold chill. She wasn't just deflecting. She was scouting. She wanted to know if I had noticed the money was gone yet, and if I hadn't. She wanted access to whatever was left. I will keep that in mind. I said, the following Monday at work, the universe decided to drop the other shoe. I was in the break room, stirring powdered creamer into my coffee. When my manager, David, walked in, he looked harried. Kennedy, do you have bandwidth this week? He asked. I can make some. I said, what do you need? We just got flagged for a priority audit on a regional lender. The risk committee is worried about their exposure to some new development projects that look a little over-leveraged. They want a deep dive on their compliance regarding source of funds. Who is the lender? I asked. Harborvine Financial. David said. My spoon clattered against the side of the mug. Harborvine, I repeated, keeping my voice steady. Yeah, they are a mid-sized player. mostly aggressive mortgages and construction loans. They have been expanding rapidly in the tri-state area. We need to check their KYCs, know your customer protocols. I felt a strange buzzing in my ears. This was not a coincidence. In a town the size of Ravenport, financial circles overlapped. But this was too precise. I will take it, I said. I went back to my desk and pulled up the internal file on Harborvine. I wasn't looking at my father's account. That would be a conflict of interest I couldn't risk yet. I was looking at the institution itself. I spent the afternoon combing through their general ledger summaries. Harborvine was aggressive, bordering on predatory. They specialized in stated income loans products that didn't require as much documentation for borrowers who had cash, but no steady pay stubs. And then I saw the transfer patterns. I pulled up my own bank records on my personal phone, comparing them to the general deposit structures Harborvine accepted. My money hadn't been moved in one lump sum of $48,000. A transfer that size triggers a currency transaction report, or at least a significant internal alert at both the sending and receiving banks. Instead, the transfers were structured: $9,000, $8,500, $9,500, $7,000, over the course of 4 days. This is called structuring, or in the industry, smurfing. It is illegal. It is designed specifically to evade the $10,000 reporting threshold mandated by federal law. My father did not know how to structure deposits. My father balanced his checkbook by hoping for the best. He did not know the specific algorithms banks use to flag suspicious activity. But Darlene knew exactly how to fly just below the radar. I looked at the dates of the transfers. They aligned perfectly with the closing date on the Briar Glen house. They had drained me to pay the closing costs. 2 weeks before the housewarming, Darlene hosted a casual brunch for the neighbors. She insisted I come. "It is important for you to meet the community," she had said. I stood in the sunroom holding a mimosa I didn't want, wearing a pastel dress that I hated. The room was full of women who looked like Darlene, well-maintained, wearing expensive jewelry, and holding wine glasses at 2 p.m. Darlene was in her element. She was holding court near the patio doors, introducing me to a woman named Shelby, who lived 3 doors down. "And this is Graham's daughter, Kennedy," Darlene said, draping an arm around my shoulders. "She is sweet, isn't she? She is still finding her way. Bless her heart." I stiffened. I was 33. I was a senior compliance analyst. I owned my car. I had a 401k. "Finding her way?" Shelby asked, looking me up and down with pity. "Oh, that is a hard age. My niece is the same, just can't seem to get traction in her career." "I work in finance, actually," I said, my voice crisp. Darlene laughed, squeezing my shoulder tighter. "Oh, she works at a desk. Poor thing. Lots of spreadsheets. But we are trying to get her to open up a little, aren't we? Kenny, get her out of that little apartment. She made my life sound like a tragic temporary condition." I extricated myself from her grip and walked toward the buffet table, needing distance. I pretended to examine the quiche, but I kept my ears tuned to the conversation behind me. I watched Darlene move to a group of 3 other women. They were laughing. "Honestly," Darlene was saying, her voice carrying over the low hum of chatter, "I had to handle the boring money stuff myself. You know how Graham is. He is a darling. But he would have signed the moon away if I let him." The women laughed sympathetically. "Men are useless with details," one of them said. "Exactly," Darlene said. I told him, "Graham, you just pick the paint colors. I will make sure the check's clear. It is a full-time job protecting him from himself. And don't get me started on the family drama. His daughter is well. She is very sensitive, high-strung, like her mother was. I have to walk on eggshells." I stood there, staring at a mini quiche, feeling the blood drain from my face. It was the narrative. She was planting the seeds. If I spoke up later, if I accused her of theft, she had already inoculated the entire neighborhood against me. Kennedy is high-strung. Kennedy is dramatic. Graham is helpless. If I challenged her, I would just be proving her point. I realized then that Darlene wasn't just a thief. She was a master architect of social reality. She built the cage before she even caught the bird. I left the brunch 20 minutes later, citing a headache. As I walked to my car, I saw my father sitting on a bench in the front garden. He was staring at a patch of weeds, looking lost in his own yard. "Dad," I asked. He looked up, startled. "Oh, hey, Kenny? Leaving already?" "Yeah, not feeling great." He nodded, looking back at the house. "It is loud in there. Darlene likes a party. Are you happy?" "Dad?" I asked. The question hung in the humid air. He hesitated, rubbing his knees. "She takes care of things," he said softly. "She takes care of everything. I don't have to worry anymore." I looked at him, a man who had traded his autonomy for the illusion of safety. He didn't know the price of that safety was his daughter's future. "I will see you later." "Dad," I said. That evening, I was back in my apartment, adding the brunch incident to my binder. The timeline was coming together, the motive was clear, the method was established. Then, my phone pinged with an email. It was the official digital invitation to the Grand Housewarming Charity Gala at the Morgan West residence. I scrolled through the graphics: balloons, champagne glasses, a picture of the house with a filter that made it look like a glowing sanctuary. At the bottom of the email was a link. "We are blessed to have everything we need. However, if you wish to honor our new home, please consider a contribution to our neighbor-led improvement fund or browse our registry for specific community items." I clicked the link. It took me to a third-party registry site. It wasn't a standard store registry like Crate Barrel or Pottery Barn. It was a platform I didn't recognize, one that allowed for cash gifting toward larger items like landscape architecture and community art installation. I scrolled to the bottom of the page. Looking for the terms of service, I wanted to know who the payment processor was, in the fine print, listed under the registry manager field. I expected to see Darlene West or Graham Morgan. I didn't. The registry was managed by Westbridge Home Solutions. I frowned. Westbridge? West plus Bridge? Darlene West and Briar Glen. Or maybe Graham? I copied the name and plugged it into the state business entity search. Westbridge Home Solutions, LLC, registered agent Darlene West, mailing address, P.O. Box, 404, Ravenport, Massachusetts. It was a shell company. She wasn't just asking for housewarming gifts. She had set up a limited liability company to funnel cash gifts directly into a business account she controlled. And the kicker, the LLC formation date was 3 weeks before she married my father. I sat back in my chair. This wasn't just about a house. This was a business model. She married men, consolidated their assets, used their credit to buy properties, and then used the social capital of the new marriage to solicit funds from the community under the guise of home improvement or charity. She was extracting value from every single angle. I looked at the invitation again. The party was in 10 days. Everyone would be there. The neighbors, the friends, the witnesses. I picked up my pen and opened the binder to a fresh page. Objective, I wrote. Public dismantling. I wasn't going to bring a casserole to the party. I was going to bring the truth. And I needed to make sure that when I dropped it, there was nowhere for her to run. I clicked reply on the invitation. Can't wait to celebrate. I typed, I'll be bringing a special surprise. I hit send. Then I went to sleep. And for the first time since I lost the money, I slept soundly. The digital trail Darlene had left was not a road. It was a series of rabbit holes. And I had spent the last decade learning how to map the warrens of financial deceit. After discovering the Westbridge Home Solutions registry link, I did not sleep. Instead, I poured a second glass of wine and opened my laptop. Diving into the back end of the registry site she was using, it was a platform designed for modern crowdfunding, the kind that allowed couples to bypass traditional toaster ovens and ask for cash toward vague concepts like future memories or home serenity, but every merchant on the site required a verification profile. I used a simple open-source intelligence tool to cross-reference the merchant ID associated with the registry. The profile popped up on my screen. Merchant name Westbridge Home Solutions. Contact email dew@consulting.mgmt@gmail.com. Phone 555-0198. I ran the phone number. It wasn't a business landline. It was a prepaid mobile number registered to a carrier that specialized in burner phones. But the billing address for the account was listed as a P.O. box in Ravenport. The same P.O. box listed on the LLC documents I had found earlier. Then I searched for the domain name associated with the email. There was no website. Westbridge Home Solutions existed only on paper and in payment processors. It was a bucket designed to catch money falling from the sky or from my father's friends and funnel it directly into Darlene's control without ever passing through a joint account where my father might see the transaction history. She was not just stealing from me, she was setting up an infrastructure to harvest the goodwill of everyone she met. The next morning, I met Marina Klein again. This time, the mood in her office was heavier. The air conditioning hummed with a low, industrial drone that seemed to vibrate in my teeth. We filed the formal inquiry, Marina said, sliding a fresh stack of papers across the mahogany desk. The bank is legally required to investigate within 10 business days. We have requested the surveillance footage from the branch for the date the authorization was signed, and the signature I asked, picking up the photocopy of the authorization form again. Marina took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. We had a forensic document examiner take a preliminary look. He is cautious, as they all are, but he noted significant tremors in the downstrokes of the M and the G. Tremors. Hesitation marks, Marina explained. It suggests the person signing was either under duress, physically unstable, or, and this is the part you need to prepare for copying a signature they had practiced, but could not perfectly execute in muscle memory. My stomach turned. If it was a tracing, it was forgery. If it was my father's hand, shaking because he knew he was robbing his daughter, it was something far more painful. There is more, Marina said gently. The bank teller's notes. We pushed for the full transcript of the interaction. She pointed to a highlighted paragraph on the second page. Customer G. Morgan appeared confused regarding the account type. Companion D. West provided answers to security questions. Companion stated, he forgets the details. It is old money from before we were married. Customer G. Morgan did not verbally object. She spoke for him, I said, my voice cold. She controlled the narrative in the room. Marina corrected. That is standard operating procedure for elder financial abuse. But Graham isn't elderly. He is 60. He is competent. That makes this harder to prosecute as abuse. It frames it as acquiescence. I close the folder. I need to talk to him. Do not tip your hand, Marina warned. If he goes back to Darlene and tells her you know, she will destroy the evidence. She will close the Westbridge account. She will shred the papers. You need him to talk, but you cannot let him know he is being interrogated. I chose the Bluefin Diner in Old Harbor Square for a reason. It was neutral ground. It was also a place we used to go when I was a child. Back before the divorce, back when we were a family that made sense. It smelled of frying bacon and weak coffee, a sensory anchor that I hoped would drag my father back to a version of himself that possessed a spine. He arrived 5 minutes late, looking flustered. He was wearing a windbreaker that looked too expensive for him, likely another purchase Darlene had insisted upon. Hey, Kenny, he said, sliding into the booth opposite me. This is a nice surprise. Darlene was asking where I was going. I told her I had to check on the boat insurance. He laughed nervously. A lie. He had to lie to his wife just to have coffee with his daughter. I ordered us 2 coffees. I didn't smile. I didn't make small talk about the weather or the Red Sox. I waited until the waitress had placed the steaming mugs on the Formica table and walked away. Dad, I said, keeping my voice low and level, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. His smile faltered. He picked up the sugar dispenser and started turning it over in his hands. A nervous tick I hadn't seen in years. What is it? You look serious. I am serious. I got a notification from Sovereign Heritage Bank last week. He froze. The sugar dispenser stopped moving. It was about my savings account. I continued, watching his eyes, the one Mom set up for me, the reset fund. He didn't look at me. He looked at the sugar. Someone changed the email address. Dad. And someone authorized a transfer of funds. $48,000. The silence that stretched between us was thick enough to choke on. I could hear the clatter of silverware from the kitchen, the bell on the door chiming as someone walked in. Finally, he put the sugar dispenser down. He exhaled, a long, shaky breath that seemed to deflate his entire chest. "It is not gone." "Kenny," he said. His voice was pleading. "It is just moved. Moved where I asked. To the family pot." He looked up then, his eyes wet and rimmed with red. "It is all one pot now. That is what families do. Darlene said it was silly to have money sitting around in different banks, paying fees, getting lost. She said we should consolidate, simplify. Did you sign the paper, Dad?" He flinched at the direct question. "I signed a lot of papers," he said, his voice rising in defensive panic. "For the house, for the insurance. Darlene handled the paperwork. She is good at that stuff. I wanted to make it work. Kennedy, I wanted this fresh start to be real. Did you know it was my money I pressed? Did you know you were signing away the money Mom left for me?" He looked down at his coffee. "Darlene said you had plenty. She said you were doing so well at the firm. She told me you had investments, stocks, a 401k. She said this was just legacy cash that was sitting there doing nothing. Legacy cash. That was a Darlene phrase. My father didn't speak corporate buzzword." "Dad," I said, leaning forward, "that was my life savings. That wasn't extra. That was my safety net." He looked stricken. "I didn't know it was everything. She told me you wouldn't even miss it. She said we would pay it back with interest once the house equity went up. She called it a family loan. A loan requires the lender to know about it." I said. He slumped against the red vinyl of the booth. "I am sorry. Kenny, I have been so worried about money. The wedding cost more than I thought. The down payment on the house was higher. I felt like I was drowning. And Darlene she fixed it. She always fixes it. She put a piece of paper in front of me and said, 'Sign this, Graham, and we can stop worrying.' So I signed it. I didn't read the fine print. I just wanted the worrying to stop. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. It wasn't greed. He hadn't stolen my money to buy a sports car. He had stolen it because he was terrified of disappointing his new wife. He was a man who had spent his entire life being piloted by stronger women. And now he was being piloted by a predator, my anger, which had been a sharp, hot blade pointed at his chest, shifted. It cooled and hardened. Turning away from him and locking onto the invisible woman sitting between us. "It is okay. Dad," I lied. He looked up, hopeful. We will figure it out." I said, "I just needed to know." I stood up. I couldn't look at him anymore without breaking his heart or mine, and I needed my heart intact for what came next. "You finish your coffee," I said. "I have to get back to work." I left the diner with a new clarity. My father was a casualty, not a combatant. Darlene had weaponized his weakness. She had used his shame about money to manipulate him into robbing his own child. I drove back to my apartment to change for the afternoon shift, and that was when the second blow landed. I checked the mail. Amidst the flyers and bills was a letter from a credit monitoring service. Alert new address. Detected. I tore open the envelope. Based on recent activity, the following address has been associated with your credit profile 42 Oak Ridge Drive, Briar Glen, M.A. I froze. She hadn't just taken the cash. I logged into the credit bureau's website immediately. There was a soft inquiry from a home insurance provider and another from a utility company. Both had been initiated in the last 10 days. Darlene was listing me as a resident. Why I stared at the screen. My analyst brain racing. Why link me to the house I wasn't on the deed? I wasn't on the mortgage. Then it hit me. Insurance. Or maybe she was using my credit score to bolster a secondary application for something else. If she listed me as a household member with income, it lowered the debt-to-income ratio for the household. It made them look more solvent. She was using me as a structural beam to hold up her house of cards. I printed the report. I added it to the binder. This was not just theft. This was identity fraud. And she had done it with the casual arrogance of someone who believed I would never check, or that if I did, I would be too nice to do anything about it. She had bet on my silence. She had bet on the fact that I was Graham Morgan's daughter, quiet, dutiful, compliant. She forgot I was also my mother's daughter. The next day at Northbridge Compliance, the atmosphere was tense. The audit of Harborvine Financial was expanding. "Kennedy," my boss David said, stopping by my cubicle, "we are pulling a random sampling of loan originations from the last quarter for the Harborvine Review. I need you to lead the analysis on the gift letter verification process." I nodded, keeping my face blank. "Sure. What is the specific concern we suspect they are coaching borrowers on how to fake gift letters?" David said, "You know the drill. Borrower doesn't have the cash for closing, so they get a gift from a relative, but it is actually a loan. Or worse, recycled funds from an undisclosed line of credit. It is mortgage fraud 101. I felt a cold prickle of recognition. Recycled funds, undisclosed lines of credit. I took the files. I sat at my desk and opened the first one. I wasn't looking at my father's file that would be unethical and would get me fired. I had to keep my personal investigation completely firewall separated from my professional one. But the knowledge was there. It was like knowing a secret language. As I reviewed the files of strangers, I saw the patterns, the same vague letters, the same transfers just under $10,000, the same rapid movement of money from savings to checking to escrow. Harborvine wasn't just a sloppy bank. They were an enabler. They were the engine that people like Darlene used to drive over people like my father. I realized then that my revenge couldn't just be about getting my $48,000 back. If I just got my money, Darlene would move on to the next victim. She would drain my father dry, then find another widower. I had to burn the bridge she was standing on. 2 days later, I drove to Briar Glen for the Housewarming Planning Committee. Darlene had texted me 3 times, begging me to come. "We need your organizational skills," she had written, followed by a string of heart emojis. I arrived at 6. The house was buzzing with activity. A caterer was measuring the dining room table. A florist was looking at the light in the foyer. Darlene was in the center of it all, holding a clipboard like a scepter. "Kennedy," she cried, rushing over to air-kiss my cheek. "Thank God you are here. The logistics are a nightmare." She steered me toward the kitchen island. "Okay, here is the vision," she said, her eyes bright with manic energy. "We want this to be more than just a party. We want it to be a moment for the community. So, I have decided we are going to do a charity drive." She pointed to a sketch on the counter. It showed a large, lucite box near the front door, surrounded by flowers. "We are calling it the Community Giving Station," she said. "I want everyone to donate to a charity I have been working with. It is called Bright Tomorrow Homes. They build tiny houses for homeless veterans. Isn't that beautiful, Bright Tomorrow Homes?" The name sounded perfect, too perfect, like it had been generated by an AI asked to create a generic, unoffensive charity name. "That sounds wonderful." "Darlene," I said, "is it a local 501c3? She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, yes, yes. It is a national network. But we are fundraising for the local chapter. They are very grassroots. They don't waste money on big websites or overhead. Every dollar goes to the building materials." I smiled. "That is so noble of you." I pulled out my phone. "Mind if I look them up? I want to see if my company does matching gifts." Darlene stiffened slightly. "Oh, they are in the middle of a rebrand right now. Their database might be down. Just write the check to the collection fund, and we will bundle it all together. It is easier that way. Easier." While she turned to yell at the florist about the hydrangeas, I typed Bright Tomorrow Homes into the IRS tax-exempt organization search. No results found. I tried variations. Bright Tomorrow Incorporated. Nothing. I searched the state charity registry. Nothing. It was a ghost. Just like Westbridge Home Solutions. It was another bucket. She was going to stand in front of her neighbors, give a tearful speech about homeless veterans, collect thousands of dollars in cash and checks, and then what? Funnel it into her renovation budget. Pay off the credit cards she used to buy the curtains. It was bold. It was reckless. And it was the opening I had been waiting for. Darlene, I said, putting my phone away, I think this is a fantastic idea. In fact, let me help. You are so busy with the food and the decor. Why don't I handle the donation station? Darlene turned back to me, her face relaxing into a look of genuine relief. You would do that? Absolutely, I said. I can set up the signage, get the collection box looking professional. I can even create some little information cards for the guests so they know where their money is going. She beamed. Oh, Kennedy, that would be a lifesaver. You are so good at the technical details. Graham was right. You really are stepping up. She reached out and squeezed my arm. Just make sure the checks are made out to Westbridge Community Fund, she whispered. That is the fiscal sponsor we are using to bundle the donations. Westbridge. Of course. I will make sure everything is perfect. I promised. I went home and went to work. If Darlene wanted professional, I would give her professional. I sat at my computer and designed a set of beautiful, high-resolution welcome cards. They were printed on heavy, cream-colored cardstock, elegant and understated. On the front, in gold foil script, "Welcome to our home." On the back, "A gift for the future. Please scan to learn about our cause." Below the text was a large, crisp QR code. Darlene would love them. They looked expensive. They looked validated. But the QR code did not go to a charity website. It did not go to Westbridge Home Solutions. I spent 3 hours coding the landing page. I bought a domain that looked legitimate, brighttomorrowverify.org, so that if anyone glanced at the URL, it would seem safe. I built the page to look like a transparency report. Header charity verification status, organization Bright Tomorrow Homes, status registration not found, I none listed. And below that, a simple, bulleted list titled, Know Your Donation. This entity is not listed in the IRS 501c3 database. This entity has no registered address in the state of Massachusetts. Please verify all cash solicitations before donating. It was factual. It was neutral. It was libel-proof. It didn't say, Darlene West is a thief. It simply said, this charity does not exist. And then, at the very bottom of the page, I added a second section, Related Public Records for Address 42 Oak Ridge Drive. I uploaded a redacted image of the bank authorization form I had received from Marina. I blurred out the account numbers, but I left the date visible. I left the signature line visible, the shaky forced scrawl of Graham Morgan, and I left the teller's note visible. Daughter requested family consolidation. It was a mirror. I wasn't going to scream at the party. I wasn't going to throw wine. I was going to let the guests scan the code, read the truth on their own screens, and then look up at Darlene. I ordered 200 cards from a rush printer. They would be ready on Friday. I leaned back in my chair. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm. Darlene wanted a community donation box. She wanted to be the center of attention. She wanted to show everyone what she had built. I was going to give her exactly what she asked for. I picked up the binder. It was heavy now, filled with the weight of her lies. I closed it and placed it in my bag. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for the mouse to put on her best dress and walk into it. The Saturday of the housewarming arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. The air was heavy, humid, and threatening rain, the kind of New England weather that made your hair frizz and your mood tighten. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a pharmacy 3 blocks from Briar Glen, reviewing the plan with Marina Klein on speakerphone. My hands were on the steering wheel, gripping the leather at 10 and 2, grounding myself. The site is live, I said. I checked it on mobile and desktop. It is clean, no accusations, just the IRS search widget and the state registry checklist. Good. Marina's voice came through, clear and professional. Remember, truth is an absolute defense against libel. You are not saying she is a fraud. You are simply providing a tool for guests to verify their charitable contributions. If the tool happens to reveal that the charity doesn't exist, that is a matter of public record, not defamation. I took a deep breath. And Noah. He will be there at 7, Marina said. He is wearing a blue blazer and looking very much like a retired actuary who enjoys golf. His cover is that he is a friend of a neighbor from your old street. He is just there to listen. Kennedy. He is a forensic accountant. He hears things in financial bragging that normal people miss. If Darlene makes claims about assets or income sources, he will note them. Thank you. Marina. Kennedy, she added, her voice softening slightly. She is going to try to break you. She knows you're up to something, maybe not this, but she senses the resistance. She will try to make you look emotional. Do not give her the satisfaction. I won't. I hung up the phone and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I had chosen my outfit carefully. A tailored cream pantsuit that looked professional but soft. High heels that gave me height but not aggression. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a woman who had handled the catering. On the passenger seat sat a box of 200 cream-colored cards with the gold foil text and the QR code. Next to it sat a smaller, heavier box containing 25 wax-sealed envelopes. The cards were the bait. The envelopes were the trap. I put the car in drive and headed toward the house my money had bought. The driveway was already filling up with cars, Mercedes SUVs, pristine sedans, the occasional vintage convertible. Darlene had cast a wide net. She wanted an audience, and she had gotten one. I walked up the stone path, carrying the box of cards. The front door was open, spilling golden light onto the porch. Music, some generic jazz playlist drifted out. I stepped inside. The foyer was transformed. There were fresh flowers on every surface, towering arrangements of white lilies and hydrangeas that smelled overwhelming. The community giving station was set up exactly where Darlene had wanted it, a lucite box on a pedestal, draped in velvet, right next to the entrance. I smiled at the greeter, a teenage girl I didn't recognize, likely hired for the night, and set my box down. Hi, I said brightly. I am Kennedy, the daughter. I am just going to set up the information cards for the charity. The girl nodded. Bored. Sure. I arranged the cards in a neat fan around the slot of the donation box. The gold foil caught the light. A gift for the future. Please scan to learn about our cause. They looked beautiful. They looked official. Kennedy. The voice came from the top of the stairs. Darlene was descending, looking like a queen in a shimmering silver gown that clung to her hips. She had a champagne flute in one hand and was waving with the other. You are here. She glided down the remaining steps and pulled me into a hug. I stiffened instinctively, but I didn't pull away. I let her perform the affection. The cards look lovely, she whispered against my ear, her voice dropping an octave so only I could hear. Thank you for finally getting on board. It makes things so much easier for your father when you aren't fighting us. She pulled back, beaming at me, searching my face for a reaction. I am happy to help. Darlene, I said, keeping my voice mild. Transparency is so important for these things. Her eyes flickered, a micro-expression of doubt, but then she smoothed it over with a laugh. Exactly. Transparency. She took a sip of her champagne. By the way, Graham is in the den. Try not to upset him. Okay. He's been anxious all day. We don't want him having an episode. She patted my cheek, a dismissive, infantilizing gesture, and turned to greet a couple walking through the door. I made my way to the den. My father was standing by the fireplace, holding a scotch he hadn't touched. He looked impeccable in a navy suit, but the fit was slightly loose, as if he had lost 10 pounds in the last month. He wasn't mingling. He was hiding. Dad, he looked up, and the relief in his eyes broke my heart. Kenny, you came. Of course I came. He looked around nervously. Is everything okay? Darlene said you were handling the donations. I nodded. It is all set up. He sighed, shoulders slumping. Good. She has worked so hard on this. I just want tonight to go well. She says this foundation is going to be a big legacy for us. I looked at him, a man who had worked 40 years in insurance, who had been risk-averse his entire life, now parroting lines about legacy and foundations that he clearly didn't understand. Dad. I said softly, "Do you know what the charity actually does?" He blinked. "Well, veterans. Homeless veterans. Building tiny homes. It is noble work." "Kenny, did you see the paperwork for it?" I asked. "The registration." He frowned, a shadow of irritation crossing his face. "Why do you always ask about paperwork? Darlene handled it. She has a consultant. Look, can we just not do this tonight? Can we just have a nice dinner?" I saw the fear again, the fear of conflict, the fear of being told he had made a mistake. "Okay, Dad," I said, "we can have a nice dinner." I squeezed his arm and walked back out into the party. I had to let him be. The only way to save him was to show him the fire, not tell him about the smoke. By 8 o'clock, the house was packed. There were at least 60 people circulating through the open-concept ground floor. Waiters passed trays of scallop ceviche and mini beef Wellingtons. The wine flowed freely. I spotted Noah Vance near the kitchen. He was chatting with a man I recognized as the president of the local Rotary Club. Noah looked perfectly nondescript gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a slightly rumpled blazer. He caught my eye for a fraction of a second and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. He was listening. I circulated, playing the role of the dutiful daughter. I smiled. I shook hands. I accepted compliments about the house. "It is stunning. Isn't it?" a woman named Beverly said to me. She was wearing enough diamonds to light up a small runway. "Darlene has such vision." She was telling me about the master suite renovation imported Italian marble. I kept my smile fixed. "Yes, I believe the marble was very expensive, and she is so savvy," Beverly continued, leaning in. She was telling us about this women-led property project she is starting. Syndicate investing. "It sounds fascinating. I am thinking of putting some of my husband's bonus into it." My stomach tightened. It was already happening. The housewarming wasn't just a party. It was a sales pitch. She was using the house as proof of concept to lure in fresh capital. "Excuse me," I said to Beverly, "I need to check on the donation box." I walked back to the foyer. A small crowd had gathered around the lucite box. People were pulling out their phones. I watched from the archway of the dining room, my heart hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I saw a man in a tweed jacket pick up one of my cards. He scanned the QR code with his iPhone. He frowned. He tapped his screen, waited, and frowned again. Then he turned to his wife. "Honey, look at this. It says registration not found." His wife peered at the phone. "What does that mean?" "It means the state doesn't have a record of them," the man said, his voice carrying over the low hum of the jazz. A woman standing next to them, the neighbor from the brunch. The one Darlene had introduced as Shelby, pulled out her own phone. "Let me try." I watched Shelby scan the code. Her screen loaded the page I had built. The red text was stark against the white background and none listed. "That is weird," Shelby said. She looked around. Her brow furrowed. "I used to work in development for the United Way. You have to have an EIN to solicit funds. Even if you are pending status, it shows up in the database." I stayed in the shadows, watching the ripple effect. It was like dropping a stone in a still pond. One person whispered to another. Phones were passed back and forth. The conversation near the door shifted from the catering to the confusing website. Then Darlene appeared. She swept into the foyer, laughing at something a guest had said, looking radiant. She spotted the group by the donation box and beamed. "Oh, wonderful. You are all checking out the cause. It is such a passion project of mine." "Darlene," Shelby said, her voice cutting through the pleasantries. "The link on the card, it goes to a verification page. It says the charity isn't registered." Darlene froze. Her smile didn't drop, but it became rigid, like a mask that had been pulled too tight. "What?" she laughed. A high, brittle sound. "Oh, that must be a tech glitch. You know how websites are. Kennedy set that up for me. She is sweet. But she isn't exactly a web developer." She tried to wave it off, reaching for the box of cards as if to move them. "Actually," the man in tweed said, looking at his phone, "this isn't a glitch. It is a live search of the IRS database. It says, 'No results for Bright Tomorrow Homes.' And there is a checklist here. It says the address matches a residential P.O. box. The air in the foyer changed. It went from warm and social to sharp and curious. These were people with money. They understood due diligence. They knew what a 501c3 was. Darlene's eyes darted around the circle of faces. I saw the panic flare behind her contact lenses. Well, like I said, she stammered, smoothing her dress with a nervous hand. We are in the middle of a rebrand. The paperwork is probably just stuck in the system. Bureaucracy, right? She laughed again, but no one joined in. I stepped out of the shadows. Is there a problem? I asked, my voice calm, projecting just enough to be heard. Darlene whipped her head toward me. Her eyes were venomous, but she forced her voice to remain sweet. Kennedy. There seems to be a mistake with the link you made. It is confusing the guests. I walked over to the group. Standing next to the man in tweed, I am so sorry. I said to him, let me look. I looked at his phone. Oh, no, I said, sounding perplexed. That isn't a mistake. That is the transparency report. I thought, Darlene, didn't you say you wanted everyone to know exactly where the money was going? Darlene's jaw clenched. Kennedy, not now, but I checked the state database this morning. I continued, looking at Shelby. There is no charity registered under that name. And the EIN you gave me, it was missing a digit. I just wanted to make sure we weren't accepting donations illegally. You know how strict the compliance laws are. I wasn't accusing her. I was just being the helpful, detail-oriented daughter. Darlene's face flushed a blotchy red. She moved toward me, closing the physical distance, her perfume suddenly cloying and suffocating. Kennedy, she hissed, low enough that only the immediate circle could hear. Stop this. You are embarrassing your father. She turned back to the guests, her voice pitching up into a bright, manic cheer. Okay, everyone, ignore the tech hiccups. Let's have a toast. Come on. Into the living room, I have a big announcement. She grabbed my arm hard, her nails digging into my bicep and practically dragged me toward the sunken living room. Come on, Kennedy, you too. She was pivoting. She was going to try to drown the facts in noise. The guests shuffled into the living room, sensing the tension but unsure of the source. My father was there, looking bewildered as people filed in. Darlene let go of my arm and grabbed a fresh glass of champagne from a passing waiter. She climbed onto the single step that separated the foyer from the living room. Giving her a stage, everyone she called out. The room quieted. Thank you so much for coming to our new home, she began, her voice trembling slightly with suppressed rage or adrenaline. Graham and I are so blessed. Truly, it has been a whirlwind year. She looked down at Graham, who offered a weak smile. You know, she continued, when I met Graham, things were well. They were a bit chaotic. He needed a partner. He needed someone to help him build a future. And I am so proud of what we have done here. We saved this family from stagnation. She raised her glass. And I want to make a special toast to my bonus daughter. Kennedy. Every head turned toward me. I stood near the fireplace, my hands clasped in front of me. Kennedy has had a hard time adjusting, Darlene said, her voice dripping with fake empathy. Change is scary, and I know she worries about money. She gets that from her mother. A ripple of uncomfortable silence went through the room. Bringing up the dead mother was a tactical error. It was too aggressive. But Darlene plowed on. We love her, and we want her to know that even though she is struggling to find her path, she always has a home here. To family, to family. A few people murmured, mostly out of politeness. Darlene took a long drink, her eyes locking onto mine over the rim of the glass. It was a challenge. I have the microphone. I have the crowd. You are just the jealous daughter. I waited until she lowered the glass. I smiled, a genuine, soft smile. Thank you. Darlene, I said. My voice was clear. I didn't need to shout. The room was dead silent. That is so kind of you. I continued. And you are right. I have been worried about money lately. Darlene smirked. See? She was thinking. She admits it. But, I said, taking a step forward, I realized tonight that I shouldn't be worried because you have taught me so much about creative financing. I reached into the tote bag I had left on the side table. I pulled out the stack of 25 cream-colored envelopes. They were small, sealed with a gold sticker that matched the party invitations. I actually brought a housewarming gift, too. I said, "Since we are sharing everything." Darlene's smirk faltered. "What is that?" I started walking through the room, handing the envelopes to the people who mattered. I handed one to Shelby. I handed one to the man in tweed. I handed one to the president of the Rotary Club. I handed one to Noah Vance. "Just some memories," I said, "a timeline of how we got here." "Kennedy," Darlene said, her voice sharpening. "Stop it! What are you doing?" I handed an envelope to my father. He took it, his hands shaking. "Open it, Dad," I said gently. Darlene scrambled down from the step. "Graham, don't. She is just trying to start drama. She is unstable." But it was too late. The sound of tearing paper filled the room. Zip, zip, zip. I watched Shelby pull out the contents of her envelope. It was a single sheet of paper. Folded once, on it was a timeline I had created. April 12th, account X, 8902. Accessed, April 12th. Email changed from k.morgan@ to d.west.consulting at April 14th to April 18th, 5 transfers totaling $48,000. Beneficiary Westbridge Home Solutions, memo Briar Glen closing costs. And below that, a photocopy of the authorization form with the shaky signature, and the highlighted teller note, "Daughter requested family consolidation." I stood in the center of the room. I didn't look crazy. I didn't look unstable. I looked like an analyst presenting a quarterly report. The room went cold. It wasn't the polite cold of a failed joke. It was the absolute zero of a social execution. Shelby looked up from the paper. Her face was pale. "This," she started, looking at Darlene. "This shows a transfer from Kennedy's account to your LLC." Darlene lunged for the paper in Shelby's hand. "Give me that. It is fake. She forged it." She missed. Shelby pulled the paper back. "It has the bank transaction IDs," the man in tweed said, reading his copy. "These are verifiable wire numbers." Darlene spun around, her face wild. "Graham, tell them. Tell them it was a family loan. Tell them she agreed to it." My father was staring at the paper in his hand. He wasn't reading the numbers. He was staring at the photocopy of the signature card. He looked at the shaky, jagged scrawl of his own name, and then he looked at the date. He looked up at Darlene. "April 12th, he whispered. Darlene froze. "April 12th. Dad." I said, "That was the Tuesday I was at the compliance conference in Boston. I wasn't even in Ravenport." My father's face crumbled. He looked at Darlene with a mixture of horror and confusion, but he said, his voice cracking, "You told me she was there. You told me she came by the branch on her lunch break to set it up. You brought the papers home for me to sign because you said she had already signed them at the bank." Darlene's mouth opened and closed. She was trapped. She had told him one lie to get the signature, and told the bank a different lie to use the signature. And now, the two lies were colliding in public. "I never said that." Darlene stammered. "You are confused. Graham, your memory is getting so bad." "Don't," I said. The word was sharp, cutting through her deflection. "Do not gaslight him. Not tonight." I turned to the guests. "I am sorry to disrupt the party," I said calmly. But Darlene mentioned transparency. The money that paid for the closing costs on this house, the money that paid for the room we are standing in, was taken from my savings account without my permission. It was structured into 5 payments to avoid federal reporting limits. I pointed to Noah Vance. "Structuring is a federal crime," Noah said quietly. He didn't shout it. He just stated it like a fact about the weather. Darlene looked around the room. Her audience was gone. The admiration had evaporated, replaced by the horrified fascination of people watching a car crash. She looked at Beverly. Beverly looked away. She looked at Shelby. Shelby was folding the paper and putting it in her purse evidence. Darlene's face contorted. The mask didn't just crack. It shattered. "You little bitch!" she screamed. The sound was shocking in the elegant room. "I didn't flinch. I did this for us," Darlene yelled. gesturing wildly at the walls. I built this, I gave this family a status. And you selfish, hoarding little brat, you want to ruin it over a few $1,000s. A few $1,000s? My father asked. His voice was stronger now. $48,000. He looked at me. Kenny, is that true? I nodded. It was everything Mom left me. Dad. He looked back at Darlene. He looked at the woman he had married. The woman he had let lead him by the nose because he was afraid of being alone. And in that moment, Darlene realized she had lost him. She sneered. Oh, grow up, Graham. You signed the papers. You are just as guilty as I am. If I go down, I am taking you with me. The silence that followed was heavy and final. She had played her last card, mutual destruction, but she had forgotten one thing. I looked at my father. He looked terrified. He thought he was going to jail. I stepped closer to him. No, Dad, I said clearly, so everyone could hear. You aren't guilty. You were misled, and we can prove it. I turned to Darlene. I haven't called the police yet. Darlene, but I have filed a fraud report with the bank, and they have the video footage from the branch on April 12th. Her face went white. They know I wasn't there. I said, and they know you were. I didn't need to say anything else. The room knew. The neighbors knew. The Rotary Club president knew. Darlene stood in the center of her beautiful, stolen living room, holding a glass of warm champagne, completely alone. I turned to my father. Come on, Dad, I said, let's go. He hesitated for a second, looking at Darlene, looking at the house. Then he put his glass down on the mantelpiece. He walked over to me. He didn't look back. We walked out of the house, past the frozen guests, past the donation box with the damning cards, and into the cool night air. The rain finally started to fall, gentle and cleansing. I didn't look back at the window. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening inside. The collapse had begun. We had made it as far as the foyer, the heavy oak door within reach, when Darlene's voice cracked through the air like a whip. You are not leaving, she shouted, her heels clicking rapidly against the marble floor as she rushed after us. You are not going to walk out of here and leave a mess like this for me to clean up. I stopped. My father stopped. The silence in the house was absolute. Save for the generic jazz playlist that was still looping cheerfully in the background, oblivious to the carnage. I turned around. Darlene was standing at the base of the stairs, her chest heaving. She had composed her face again, pulling the shattered pieces of her expression into a look of indulgent, pitying frustration. She wasn't speaking to me, though. She was speaking to the room, to the 60 guests who were now crowding the archways of the living room and dining hall, watching us with wide, unblinking eyes. Everyone, please, Darlene said, offering a tight, trembling smile. I am so sorry for this display. Kennedy is well. She is confused. She walked toward us, hands clasped, adopting the posture of a patient mother dealing with a toddler. Kennedy, honey, she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I know you have been under a lot of stress at work, but we discussed this. Remember 3 years ago? You told your father that if he ever needed help with a major life transition, you wanted to contribute. You called it your family duty. I watched her weave the lie. It was impressive, in a dark, twisted way. She was taking the vaguest possible truth that I loved my father and stretching it until it covered a felony. It was a loan. Darlene continued, turning to the Rotary Club president, who was watching from the hallway. A family loan, internal. We didn't paper it because we are family. Kennedy agreed to float the closing costs until our other investments matured. Now she is just having a moment, probably buyer's remorse. She looked at me, her eyes hard as flint. Tell them, Kennedy, tell them you are just stressed and forgot the conversation. My father looked at me, his eyes pleading. He wanted it to be true. He wanted, more than anything, for there to be a version of this story where his wife wasn't a thief and his daughter wasn't a victim. I didn't answer her. I didn't argue about conversations that never happened. That was a trap. If I argued about memory, it became her word against mine. Instead, I reached into my bag. I bypassed the binder. I went straight for the slim blue folder I had kept separate. I didn't agree to anything. I said, my voice calm, cutting through her narrative, and neither did Mom. Darlene stiffened. Leave your mother out of this. I opened the folder. Inside was a single document, yellowed slightly at the edges, protected by a plastic sleeve. I handed it to my father. Do you remember this? Dad, I asked. He took the paper. His hands were shaking so badly the plastic rattled. It was a notarized letter, dated 6 months before my mother passed away. Read the second paragraph. I said, my father squinted at the familiar, jagged cursive. I saw his lips move as he read the words to himself, and regarding the savings account ending in 8902, held at Sovereign Heritage Bank, this fund is established solely for Kennedy's independent future. It is not to be commingled with marital assets. It is not to be accessed by Graham for household debts. And it is under no circumstances to be repurposed by anyone other than Kennedy herself. I'm securing this separately because I know Graham's heart is bigger than his judgment. The room was silent. My father looked up. His face wasn't angry. It was crushed. He looked like a man who had just watched his own house burn down and realized he was holding the matches. I remember this. He whispered. I drove her to the notary. She made me promise. He looked at Darlene. I told you, he said, his voice cracking. When we got married, I told you about this account. I told you it was off limits. I told you it was the one thing Catherine made me swear to protect. Darlene's face twitched. She took a step back, her silver dress catching the light. Oh, Graham, please. That was years ago. People change their minds. You told me yourself that Kennedy was doing so well, that she didn't need a crutch anymore. We were just borrowing it, to build our future, to build this. She gestured frantically at the grand foyer, the chandelier, the expensive molding. We were protecting the family, she insisted. Her voice rising to a shriek. I did this for you. She moved toward him, reaching for his arm, trying to physically pull him away from me. Come into the kitchen. Graham, she urged, her voice dropping to a frantic whisper. Just for a minute. Let's talk about this privately. People are staring. We can fix this. Just come with me. She was trying to isolate the variable. She needed to get him alone, away from the evidence, away from the witnesses, so she could reset his reality. She would cry. She would threaten. She would rewrite the last 10 minutes until he believed her. I didn't chase her. I didn't grab his other arm. I just stood there. I let the guests see it. I let them see her clawing at his sleeve, her desperate, manic need to control the man she claimed to save. My father didn't move. He stood planted on the marble floor, staring at the letter from his dead wife. No, he said. He didn't shout it. He just said it. Darlene froze. What? We are not going to the kitchen, my father said. Darlene's eyes darted around the room. She was losing the room. She needed a new angle. This is ridiculous, she spat. Turning back to the crowd, this is a misunderstanding about dates and transfers. It is boring accounting stuff. Kennedy is making it sound like a conspiracy. From the back of the room, a calm, level voice spoke up. Actually, the accounting is quite specific. It was Noah Vance, the forensic accountant. He stepped forward, holding the timeline I had included in the welcome packet. He looked exactly as Marina had promised, like a bored neighbor, but his eyes were sharp. I couldn't help but notice the transfer dates. Noah said, adjusting his glasses, April 14th, April 16th, April 18th. He looked at Darlene. Those dates align perfectly with the standard escrow release schedule for a property of this size. And looking at the contractor lien waivers that are public record, he paused, letting the words hang in the air. The $9,000 transfer on the 16th matches the deposit requirement for the landscape architecture firm listed on your registry. To the penny. He lowered the paper. That is not a loan. Mrs. West, that is direct financing. You were paying the vendors with Kennedy's money as fast as it hit your account. You were laundering the funds through the house. Darlene glared at him. Who the hell are you? I am just a neighbor, Noah said pleasantly. Who happens to be a forensic accountant? The color drained from Darlene's face. She looked at the crowd. They weren't just curious anymore. They were judging. They were doing the math. Then, the front door opened. It wasn't the police. It was Marina Klein. She walked in, shaking the rain off a black umbrella. She looked impeccably professional, wearing a trench coat and carrying a briefcase. She stepped into the foyer as if she had been invited to give a keynote speech. She walked straight to me and handed me a file. "I apologize for the interruption," Marina said, her voice projecting clearly, but given the public discussion regarding ownership and liability, I thought this was relevant. She turned to the guests. "I am Kennedy's attorney," she stated. Darlene let out a strangled laugh. "You brought a lawyer to a housewarming. You are psychotic." "Kennedy," I didn't respond to the insult. I opened the file Marina had given me. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a blown-up screenshot of a credit report. I held it up. "This is my credit report," I said. As of yesterday, I pointed to a line item highlighted in yellow. "Can anyone tell me why my Social Security number is linked to a residential insurance inquiry for 42 Oak Ridge Drive?" I looked at Darlene. "You didn't just take the cash. Darlene, you tried to link my identity to this property." Marina stepped forward, her voice cool and educational. "For those unaware," she said, addressing the room, "linking a third party's credit profile to a property without their deeded ownership is a common tactic in asset layering. It allows the primary resident to leverage the victim's credit score for lower insurance premiums, utility bonds, and future lines of credit. It effectively makes the victim a silent cosigner for debts they do not control." She looked at Graham. "It also means, Mr. Morgan, that if this house were to face foreclosure or a liability lawsuit, your daughter's financial future would be the collateral damage." Darlene wasn't just spending Kennedy's past savings. She was mortgaging Kennedy's future. My father looked at the report. He looked at me. He looked sick. "Darlene," he whispered, "you told me you added her to the family plan for AAA. You asked for her Social Security number for the roadside assistance." Darlene threw her hands up. "Oh, for God's sake. So what I was trying to help. I was trying to build a household where everyone contributed." She turned on me, her face twisting into a mask of pure ugliness. "You are enjoying this, aren't you?" she sneered. "You have been planning this for weeks, little Miss Perfect, sitting in her sad little apartment, judging us." She took a step toward me, stabbing a finger in my direction. "You are sabotaging a new marriage because you are jealous. That is all this is. You are a lonely, bitter woman who can't stand that her father found happiness. You want him all to yourself. You do this to people. Kennedy. You push them away with your spreadsheets and your rules, and then you cry when you are left alone. The insults landed. They hurt. They were designed to hurt." She was targeting my deepest insecurity, the fear that my need for safety made me unlovable. I felt the sting of tears in my eyes. I didn't blink them away. I let them be there. I looked at her. I didn't shout. I didn't defend my dating life. I didn't defend my apartment. "I am hurt, Darlene," I said. My voice shook slightly, and I let it. "I am hurt because I wanted this to be real." I looked at my father. "I wanted you to be happy. Dad, I saw how lonely you were after Mom died. When you met Darlene, I was relieved. I wanted to believe she was the fresh start you kept talking about. I wanted to believe that I could just be your daughter and not your financial guardian." I took a breath. The room was so quiet, I could hear the rain hitting the roof. "I didn't care about the money because I am greedy," I said to Darlene. "I cared about it because it was the only thing I had that felt safe. And you took it. You didn't ask. You just took it. And then you invited me here, to this house, and asked me to smile while you spent it. I wasn't the auditor anymore. I was the daughter." And the raw honesty of it cut through Darlene's performance like a laser. The guests looked down. Some looked ashamed to be drinking her wine. Darlene opened her mouth to retort, to find some new angle of attack. Enough. The word was quiet, but it stopped her cold. Graham Morgan stepped forward. He seemed taller than he had 5 minutes ago. The slump in his shoulders was gone, replaced by a rigid, trembling tension. "Stop speaking for me, Darlene," he said. "Graham," she started, her voice wavering. "Stop," he repeated. He walked over to her. He didn't touch her. He just looked at her, searching her face as if seeing a stranger. "I want you to answer one question," he said. Darlene glared at him. "Don't do this here. Graham." "Did you change the email on the account?" he asked. Darlene rolled her eyes. "Graham, I told you. The bank." "The bank didn't do it," he said, his voice rising. "The bank needs a verification code. They send it to the phone on file." "My phone." He pulled his phone out of his pocket. "I checked my messages." Darlene. "While Kennedy was talking, I searched for Sovereign Heritage." He held the screen up. "There are no messages, no codes, which means the verification didn't go to my phone." He took a step closer to her. "How did you verify the change?" "Darlene." Darlene backed up, hitting the edge of the lucite donation box. She was cornered. Her eyes darted left and right. I handled it." "Okay," she snapped. "I have the app on my iPad. It sent the push notification there. I just clicked approve." It was simple. She threw her hands up, exasperated. "I was saving you the hassle of logging in. You always forget your passwords." She stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. My father stared at her. Kennedy stared at her. Noah Vance adjusted his glasses. "You have the app?" my father asked slowly. Darlene blinked. "Yes. You told me you couldn't access that bank." My father said, "You told me their system was incompatible with your tablet. You told me that was why we had to move the money because you couldn't see the balance." Darlene's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "And," I added, stepping forward, "Sovereign Heritage doesn't use push notifications for contact info changes. They only use SMS text codes." I looked at her. "Unless you answered the security questions." Darlene's face went gray. "The security questions." I said, "Mother's maiden name, name of first pet." I looked at my father. "She knew those answers." "Dad, because you told her." My father looked at his wife. He looked at the woman who had charmed him, married him, and isolated him, and he finally saw the mechanics of the trap. "You impersonated me." He whispered, "You didn't just guide my hand, you became me." Darlene looked around the room. There were no allies left. The social capital she had hoarded was gone. The image of the benevolent, wealthy savior was dissolved. She was just a woman standing in a hallway, caught in a lie that was too big to swallow. "Get out," she hissed at me. "Get out of my house. It is not your house," Marina Klein said. Marina stepped forward, closing the file she was holding. "We have already filed a formal dispute regarding the source of funds for the down payment," Marina said. "Given the evidence of unauthorized access and the tracing of funds that Mr. Vance has corroborated, the bank will likely place a lien on this property by Monday morning." She looked at Darlene with a cool, professional detachment. "This is a crime scene. Mrs. West, not a home." Darlene looked at Marina, then at me, then at Graham. "Graham," she pleaded, her voice breaking into a sob. "Graham, are you going to let them do this to me? To us?" My father looked at her. He looked tired. He looked old, but for the first time in months. He looked like himself. "I think," he said slowly, "I think I'm going to go with my daughter." He turned his back on her. He walked over to me. He took my hand. His palm was cold, but his grip was firm. "Let's go." "Kenny," he said. We walked to the door. This time, Darlene didn't chase us. She couldn't. She was paralyzed, standing in the wreckage of her own ambition, watching her husband walk out the door while 60 of her neighbors watched in silence. Marina held the door open for us. Noah Vance gave me a small nod as we passed. We stepped out onto the porch. The rain was falling harder now, washing the dust off the expensive cars in the driveway. We walked to my sedan. My father got in the passenger seat without a word. I got in the driver's side. I started the engine. I looked through the rain-streaked window at the house. I could see figures moving inside, guests leaving, rushing toward the door, eager to distance themselves from the disaster. I saw Darlene standing in the window, a silhouette against the golden light. She wasn't screaming anymore. She was just watching the future she had stolen drive away. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt an exhausting, heavy relief, like setting down a backpack filled with stones. I looked at my father. He was staring out the window, watching the dark trees blur past. "I am sorry," he whispered. I reached over and squeezed his hand. "I know. Dad," I said. We drove in silence toward the harbor, leaving Briar Glen and Darlene West behind in the dark. The rain that had started the night of the housewarming did not stop for 3 days. It was a relentless, scouring downpour that stripped the leaves from the trees and turned the gutters of Ravenport into rushing streams. I spent those 3 days in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of my life while the wreckage of my family smoldered in the background. On Wednesday, the report from Sovereign Heritage Bank finally arrived. I sat in Marina Klein's office, the sound of the rain against the window pane providing a steady, rhythmic drumbeat. Marina placed a tablet on the desk between us. "We have the footage from the branch," she said. Her voice was devoid of triumph. It was the flat, professional tone of someone who had seen too many versions of this same sad story. I looked at the screen. The video was grainy, black and white, time-stamped April 12th. I saw the interior of the bank branch. I saw the desk of a personal banker. And I saw my father. He looked younger in the video, or perhaps just lighter. He was smiling. He was wearing his good coat, and sitting right next to him, leaning so close their shoulders touched, was Darlene. I watched as the banker slid a document across the desk. My father hesitated. He held the pen, hovering over the signature line. He looked at Darlene. Darlene didn't look at him. She looked at the banker, smiling, chatting, likely filling the air with the same charming noise she had used at the party. But her left hand moved. It reached out and tapped the paper, right next to the signature line, a sharp, directive tap. My father looked at her hand. Then he looked at her face. She leaned in and whispered something. He nodded, a slow, resigned motion, and signed the paper. It wasn't physical force. Marina said, interpreting the silence. She didn't hold a gun to his head. But legally, that is undue influence. You can see the hesitation. You can see the direction. And combined with the teller's testimony that she answered all the security questions, it is enough to challenge the validity of the authorization. She swiped to the next file. And then there is the signature analysis. The screen showed a magnified image of the signature from the withdrawal slip next to a sample of my father's signature from 10 years ago. The forensic team flagged it as a guided simulation, Marina explained. The pressure points are all wrong. See the heavy ink spots at the start of each letter that happens when the hand stops moving. When the writer is thinking about the shape of the letter rather than executing it from muscle memory, he was trying to make it look like his official signature, likely because she told him it had to match the bank's records perfectly. I looked at the jagged G, the cramped Morgan. It was the signature of a man trying to be someone else for a minute, just long enough to rob his daughter. It is forgery. I said, even if it is his hand, it is fraud, Marina corrected gently. And the bank agrees. They have frozen the remaining funds in the joint account and flagged the transfer to Westbridge Home Solutions as suspicious activity. They are initiating a clawback procedure. She paused, then pulled a second folder from her briefcase. But that isn't the only thing we found. I looked up. We did a deeper dive into Westbridge Home Solutions. Marina said, since we are already looking at bank fraud, we subpoenaed the deposit records associated with that routing number. She slid a spreadsheet across the desk. It wasn't just my $48,000. There were dozens of deposits. $500 here, $2,000 there. Checks written from personal accounts with names I recognized, neighbors from Briar Glen, members of the local garden club. Even the man from the Rotary Club. The memo lines told the story. Consulting fee, community design retainer, garden project donation. She was double-dipping, I realized, the nausea rising in my throat. She wasn't just using my money to buy the house. She was collecting money from the neighbors under the guise of a community improvement project and funneling it into her own renovations. She told them she was hiring a landscape architect for the neighborhood entrance. Marina said. But the payments went to a contractor who installed the patio in her backyard. She told them she was consulting on property values. She was charging them for the privilege of being her neighbor. I stared at the list. It was an ecosystem of grift. Darlene hadn't just married my father. She had colonized his life and used it as a base of operations to extract value from everyone in a 5-mile radius. She is going to lose the house, isn't she? I asked. Marina nodded. Between the bank's lien, the potential lawsuits from the neighbors once this gets out, and the mortgage fraud investigation. Yes, the house is gone. The only question now is how much collateral damage she takes with her. The collateral damage was currently sitting in a motel room on the outskirts of Seastone Cove. My father had moved out the night of the party. He couldn't go back to the condo. He had rented it out on a long-term lease when he married Darlene, convinced he would never need it again. So he was in a temporary rental, a small, shingled cottage near the water that smelled of damp wool and low tide. I drove out to see him on Thursday afternoon. The rain had finally broken, leaving behind a sky that was a hard, brilliant blue. The cottage was sparse, a beige sofa, a television from the early 2000s, and a kitchenette with a dripping faucet. My father was sitting at the small round table, staring at a cup of tea. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 4 days. His posture, usually upright and proud, was concave. He looked like a suit of clothes with the man removed. "Hey, Dad," I said, setting a bag of groceries on the counter. "I brought you some coffee. And those bagels you like from the place on 4th Street. He looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Thanks. Kenny," he said. His voice was rough, unused. I started unpacking the groceries. I moved with efficient, purposeful energy. I put the milk in the fridge. I put the coffee on the shelf. I was organizing the space because I couldn't organize him. "Have you heard from her?" he asked. I stopped, a carton of eggs in my hand. "No," I said. "Have you?" He nodded slowly. "She called. A lot. I turned the phone off. Then she sent emails. She says it was all for us. She says I am abandoning her when she needs me most." He looked at me, his eyes searching for permission to believe her. "Do you believe her?" I asked. He looked down at his hands, the hands that had signed the paper. "I want to," he whispered. "I want to believe that she loved me. Because if she didn't, then what was the last year, what was I? Just a mark." I closed the fridge door. I walked over and sat opposite him. This was the dangerous moment. This was the moment where I could have stepped in and become his savior. I could have told him it wasn't his fault. I could have told him he was a victim. I could have filled the void Darlene left with my own emotional labor, becoming the parent to my own father. But I remembered the letter from my mother. "Graham has a hole in his pocket where his spine should be. If I fixed this for him, if I carried his shame, he would never grow that spine. He would just wait for the next person to tell him who he was." "Dad," I said gently, "I think she loved the idea of you. She loved that you were kind, and she loved that you were solvent. But love doesn't look like theft. Love doesn't look like isolating you from your daughter." He flinched. "I can't tell you how to feel." I continued. "You are allowed to miss her. You are allowed to grieve the marriage you thought you had. But you cannot rewrite the math. The math says she stole from us." He nodded, a jerky, painful motion. I know. He reached out and covered my hand with his. "I am so sorry. Kenny, I am so ashamed. I look around this place." He gestured at the peeling wallpaper, "and I feel like I deserve it. I had a good life. I had a paid-off condo. I had dignity, and I traded it all for a sunroom and a smile. You can get it back." I said, "Not the condo. Maybe, but the dignity." "How?" he asked. "By handling this," I said, "by not hiding, by answering the phone when the lawyers call, by telling the truth, even when it makes you look foolish." I pulled my hand back, setting the boundary. "I will help you with the logistics, Dad. I will help you find a lawyer. I will help you with the groceries. But I cannot carry your guilt for you. You have to carry that until you are strong enough to put it down." He looked at me, really looked at me. and I saw a flicker of respect in his eyes. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that I wasn't just his little girl anymore. I was a woman who had survived him. "Okay," he said. "Okay." Darlene, however, was not ready to let go. 2 days later, my phone vibrated with a message. It was a text, but it was long enough to be a novel. "Kennedy, I hope you are proud of yourself. You have destroyed a family because of your greed. You think you are so superior, sitting in your ivory tower, judging me. But I know the truth about you. I know what you are really like. Your mother told Graham stories. You know, she told him about how difficult you were as a teenager. She told him about the trouble you got into. I have kept your secrets, Kennedy, out of respect for Graham. But if you continue with this legal witch hunt, if you continue to poison the neighbors against me, I will have no choice but to defend my character. I will tell everyone the truth about the Morgan family. I will make sure everyone knows that you are the one who is unstable. This is your only warning. Drop the lawsuit. Sign the settlement. And let us move on. For your father's sake." I read the message twice. My hand didn't shake. My heart didn't race. It was a classic extinction burst. The predator, cornered, was baring its teeth, trying to find a soft spot to bite. She was using the same old weapon's vague threats, invoking my dead mother, projecting her own instability onto me, stories about how difficult you were as a teenager. I almost laughed. As a teenager, I was a debate team captain who spent Friday nights organizing my bookshelf. My trouble was a speeding ticket when I was 19. She had nothing. She was firing blanks into the dark, hoping one of them would hit a nerve. I didn't reply. I didn't type a witty retort. I didn't defend myself. I took a screenshot. I opened my laptop, logged into the secure portal for Klein Barlow, and uploaded the image to the evidence file. Then I called Marina. She sent a threat. I said, "Good," Marina replied. "That is harassment. It violates the temporary no-contact order we requested. Don't respond." Silence scares people like Darlene more than anger. Anger feeds them. Silence starves them. I will starve her, I said. The settlement offer came the following Monday. Darlene's lawyer was a man named Salinger, a strip mall attorney who sounded tired even over the conference call. "My client is prepared to offer a repayment schedule," Salinger said. "She is liquidating some assets, jewelry, some designer items. She can offer $20,000 up front, and the remainder of the $48,000 over the next 24 months. I looked at Marina. She raised an eyebrow. "And the terms?" Marina asked. "Standard release of claims." Salinger said, "and a non-disclosure agreement regarding the financial details of the marriage and the circumstances of the dispute. Mrs. West is concerned about her reputation in the community. She wants to ensure that this matter remains private." I leaned toward the speakerphone. "No," I said. Salinger paused. "Ms. Morgan, this is a generous offer. Given the complexities of a joint account dispute, going to trial could take years. You are getting your principal back." "I am not signing an NDA," I said. "Kennedy," Salinger said, his voice taking on a patronizing edge. "Is this about the money, or is this about punishment? It is about the truth." I said. I looked at the rain-streaked window of the conference room. Darlene's reputation is her currency. I said, "It is how she operates. She uses her good standing to collect money from neighbors. She uses her community leadership to gain trust. If I sign that NDA, I am handing her a fresh license to do this to someone else. I am reloading her gun." But Salinger started. "I will take the repayment plan." I said, "I will accept the $20,000 now and the rest later. I will agree not to pursue further civil damages beyond legal fees. But I will not sign a confidentiality agreement. The record of what she did stays public. The judgment stays public." There was a long silence on the other end. "My client will not agree to that." Salinger said, "Then we go to court." I said, "And we will subpoena the records of Westbridge Home Solutions. We will subpoena the contractor invoices. We will depose the neighbors she defrauded." I waited. Salinger sighed. "I will speak to her." He hung up. 10 minutes later, he called back. She accepted. She had no choice. She knew that a public trial would expose not just the theft from me, but the theft from everyone. She chose the partial humiliation of a settlement over the total annihilation of a criminal fraud trial. I got my money back, or at least, the promise of it, but I wasn't done. I went back to my office at Northbridge Compliance. I sat at my desk, the hum of the server room vibrating through the floor. I had handled Darlene the stepmother. Now, I had to handle the system that enabled her. I pulled up the file on Harborvine Financial. The internal audit I had participated in was thorough. But it was internal. It was designed to fix problems quietly, to patch leaks before the ship sank. But Harborvine had processed those transfers. They had ignored the structuring signals. They had accepted a gift letter that was clearly manufactured. They had allowed Darlene to use my credit profile for insurance without proper verification. They were complicit. I opened a new browser window. I navigated to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's whistleblower portal. I didn't use my work email. I didn't use my name. I filed as an anonymous industry observer. I attached the redacted transaction logs. I attached the structuring timeline. I attached the analysis of the KYCs, Know Your Customer protocols that Harborvine had ignored. Subject systemic failure in source of funds verification and SAR's reporting at Harborvine Financial. I typed the narrative. I explained how the lender was prioritizing speed over compliance, how they were turning a blind eye to elder financial abuse and structured deposits. I reviewed the submission. This was the nuclear option. This would trigger a federal audit. It would freeze their lending ability. It would force them to review every single loan origination from the last 2 years. Darlene's mortgage was just one drop in this bucket, but when the bucket tipped over, it would wash away her financing, her equity, and her ability to ever pull a stunt like this again with a regulated lender. I hovered over the submit button. I thought about my father, sitting in that bank branch, hesitating. I thought about the teller who didn't ask questions because Darlene was charming. I thought about the system that was built to protect money, not people. I clicked submit. The screen flashed green. Your report has been received. I closed the laptop. It was done. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday, I drove out to Seastone Cove again. The rental cottage looked a little better. My father had cleaned the windows. He had put a pot of marigolds on the porch step. It was a small thing, but it was a sign of life. We walked down to the rocky beach. The ocean was gray and calm, the waves lapping gently against the stones. We walked for a long time in silence. My father was using a walking stick he had found, poking at the driftwood and sea glass. I got the check from Salinger. He said, "The first installment. I deposited it into your account. You didn't have to do that." I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "It is your money." He stopped walking and looked out at the horizon, where a ferry was cutting a white line across the water. "I heard about the house," he said. I nodded. The bank had foreclosed. The lien from the fraud investigation accelerated the mortgage default clause. Darlene had been evicted on Tuesday. "She is staying with a friend in Florida," he said. "She sent me one last email. She blamed me, said I didn't fight for her." He looked down at his shoes. Do you think I am a weak man?" Kennedy. The question hung in the salt air. I looked at him. I saw the lines in his face, the gray in his hair. I saw the man who had taught me to ride a bike, the man who had cried at my high school graduation. I also saw the man who had let a stranger rob me because he didn't want to have an awkward conversation. "I think you were lonely." "Dad," I said, "and loneliness makes people do desperate things." He nodded slowly. "Can you ever forgive me?" he asked. He turned to face me then. His eyes were wet. I took a deep breath. I had thought about this a lot. Forgiveness isn't a switch. "Dad," I said, "it isn't something I can just hand you like a gift card. It is a pattern. A pattern." "Yes," I said, "you broke the pattern of trust. You have to build it back, brick by brick. I can't trust you with my money yet. I can't trust you with my heart yet. But I am here. I am standing on this beach with you. I kicked a small white stone toward the water. You have to prove to me that you can live without handing your keys to the next person who smiles at you. I said, you have to prove that you can be Graham Morgan, all by yourself. If you can do that, then yes, I can forgive you. He looked at me, and then he straightened up. He gripped the walking stick tighter. I can do that, he said. I want to do that. Good, I said. We turned and walked back toward the cottage. The wind was picking up, blowing the hair back from my face. I felt light. I felt clean. I had my money back. I had my truth back. And for the first time in a long time. I had my father back, not the hero I wanted him to be, but the human being he actually was. And as for Darlene, she was a ghost now, a cautionary tale, a line item in a ledger that had been balanced and closed. I reached into my pocket and touched the keys to my own apartment. My safe, quiet, paid-for sanctuary. I was Kennedy Morgan, I was an analyst, and my audit was complete. Thank you so much for listening to I Gave My Stepmom a Housewarming Gift After She Crossed the Line with My Life Savings. I hope you enjoyed Kennedy's journey from betrayal to calculated justice. It is a story about the quiet power of documentation and the strength it takes to stand up to the people we love when they hurt us. Where are you listening from today? I would love to know where in the world our community is growing. Please drop your city or country in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want more tales of dramatic, realistic justice, please subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel. Your support helps me continue to bring these characters to life. And finally, what are your thoughts on Kennedy's decision? Was she right to refuse the NDA? Was she too hard on her father, or not hard enough? Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time, keep your receipts.